going to have a conversation about how to be a better dad. And we're talking about the story of Jairus, and he was a great man. He was a church man. He was faithful in the synagogue. And one day he had a problem in his life that he couldn't fix. He had a daughter who was sick, and so he went to get Jesus. And things didn't really work out the way I think that he had hoped, the way that he had planned. So I got some guys, we're going to have a conversation about how to be a better dad when things don't necessarily work the way that we think that they should. We're going to talk about our spiritual journey and our spiritual walk with the Lord. John, how about you? How long have you been a believer?
Since I was 18.
Okay.
I don't know what the math is on that. But
did you grow up in a Christian home? Did you have any?
we grew up in a denominational home. My brothers and I a couple of my brothers and I, we kind of got into drugs, and it led my mother to pray for us. She didn't know what else to do. And so her and my dad got saved during the charismatic movement in the 70s.
Uh-huh.
And then my oldest brother died in a car accident.
Oh, wow.
And then at the funeral home, my dad had some friends, and myself and all my brothers and my sister accepted Christ there at the funeral home.
Wow.
That's how we got saved.
How did that shape your family? I mean, is your brother younger than you?
No, I'm the youngest. He was the
he was older
oldest.
than you.
He was the oldest. But I had, I really believe the Lord spoke to me when I saw him in the coffin. I just knew he was still alive.
Wow.
Not physically, but spiritually.
Yeah.
And we found out that 2 weeks prior to his passing away, he accepted Christ at a church.
So it gave you some assurance, gave the family assurance.
Yeah. But all my brothers and my sister were all saved. We're all serving God, and my mother was the first one, and for her faithfulness of just praying for her family.
That's cool.
We saw some wonderful things happen with that.
So I think, Michael, you're the young dad in the room.
Yes.
And so, Bear is 3.5 now?
Yeah.
3.5, and Coda is...
He's just about a year.
Just about a year. So what are some things that you've learned? Like, so you've been around City Church for a while, you've been around some great dads and some good brothers in Christ. What are some things that you guys have talked about, some things that you're already starting to implement in Bear and Coda's life?
Recently, it was raining outside and we wanted to do something outside. It was raining pretty bad. And Miranda, she pulled a Pastor Eugene. She got a little bold and she said, Bear, do you want to see a miracle? Do you want to see something cool? And so we prayed for the rain to go away. And when we got to where we were going, the rain went away. A couple days later, it's raining. Bear wants to do something. And he said, hey, Mommy and Daddy, what if God made the rain go away?
Wow.
And he just, his first thought there is what God can do. Mm-hmm. And when I see that as he grows up, because I know that he will.
Yes.
Because that's part of our prayer every night,
You
too.
want to fan that into flame. You want to grow that into his spirit.
How else could I be more proud?
Yeah. That's good. Alejandro, your boys are how old?
My boys are?
Yeah, how old are they?
They're 9 and 4.
Okay. Talk to us about your spiritual routine at home. What are some of the things? Your wife is a psychologist. Correct?
Yes.
So talk about some of the spiritual routine things that you guys have done to instill faith in their life.
Yes, I really relate with Pix on the way we experience things. We have also like a moment at night where we always pray. We always discuss things. If something that happened in the day, we discuss. If we have something maybe we learned during the day, we discuss that also. But it's all about the experiences we live and how this allowed them to know more Jesus. And for example, we were in Lake Eola Park in 4th of July a year ago, and suddenly everybody starts running because they thought that there was like a gunshot in the place. So we started running as a family. We left everything there. We got into our car. I started looking in my Twitter and I noticed that it was a false alarm. So I come back and everything was lost. My wife's documents and everything. And my boy called me, Mateo, I got chills. He told me that I'm praying for you. So don't worry that things are going to, don't worry about the documents. I was thinking about credit cards. I was thinking about everything.
Wow.
So he
How old
told
was
me,
he?
So he's 9. So he told me,
8 years old.
He told me, Daddy, don't worry that God is in control and everything will be solved. And when we live in Lake Mary, so we were in Lake Eola, when we arrived like almost midnight at home, 2 people at our door waiting for us. And they told us, we are your neighbors. We live in Lake Mary. We found all your things, and they even it came with the trash we had in the stroller.
Wow.
And they came, and obviously the experience for him, as Quick said, I prayed for that, and I saw a miracle. That is something they will never forget.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
That's great.
Yeah, so they saw God at work. They saw faith
they-
at work in
they
your
saw
home,
faith
in the
at
midst
work.
of a very difficult time. Whether we like it or not, we model probably what was modeled to us. Like
That's right.
we don't get, and the older you get, the more you realize, like, I never want, I wasn't going to be like my dad. And then as you get older, you find, man, alive, shoot, I said that just like my dad said it, or you do that just like your dad. What is something that you would like to see your kids do differently, maybe than what you did when they grow up to become adults?
I mean, I can share a few things about things I wish I had done differently. I wish early on I hadn't given so much priority to my work and given more priority to what God had lined up for me, him, my relationship with my wife, then my relationship with my kids, those in my household, I have my parents living with me and others. So if I had to do it over again, I would have certainly made sure those priorities were cemented in our family pattern. I would have not given them so much technology time, to be honest, earlier. That was kind of, at times, a babysitter to let me focus. When I mentioned later on, just invite them to do what you're doing. It might take an extra moment or so. We don't have to just do what they want to do. We have to help guide them by, helping them. If it's worth you doing and you're not having the time with them, it's worth you bringing them along and giving the time to them. Is one of the things I would definitely say. And then I just would say one more kind of thing for me is I really would love to get them around other godly men. And I wish I had done that just a little bit sooner too, and just invited other godly men into my home and had conversations with them, let them be out at dinner, let them be a part of those conversations earlier on. So if I'd do it again, I'd encourage my kids to do that.
Okay, anybody else?
Part of even being a youth pastor, I'll say this, gives me a little bit of an advantage in terms of what I see with other students. And so I just had this conversation with Marcus just the other day about kids and cell phones, and I'm asking him, hey, when is your son gonna have a cell phone? Because I just see what technology does. And so Abby does not have one, and she will not have one. And we've created that essence. And so when I grew up, my parents didn't spend a lot of time with me, but I was also a late child. And so I was kind of like oops, here he is, right? So they were in their late 30s, early 40s, and so here I come, and I had a sister that was 17 years older than me. So I essentially grew up as an only child, and I just remember having a lot of time filled by video games at the time, the Super Nintendo and Nintendo and Sega, and I had outside time as well. But with Abby, we haven't even exposed her, and I've found that if you don't expose them to those things, they don't have an urge for those things. And so she's perfectly happy, she's perfectly content, and we do give her technology, but it's limited. It's here, you have my iPad for a second, you can do your little thing, but that's it. And to John's point, you produce who you are, not what you say. And so they pick up on these little keen things, and I remember at times where I'll look at her frustrated. I'm like, why did you act that way and say that? And I'll sit back and really spend time with God and going, my goodness, I act that way and I say that. And she really does. She mimics, even how I am on Wednesday nights when leaders and students see me, they go, well, Pastor Joe's walking in, and things that I say, and she picks up on that. She picks up on my firmness and my sternness and my awareness. And I see her talking to her friends in that same tone, and I say, you can't do that. But then I realize she sees that. And so, hopefully, I love what you said too. You live life and you go, man, I don't want to be like my dad. And you go, man, I've got these qualities. And so
I know for me, my kids have told me, I didn't know, and I've always felt bad about this, I didn't know how much video games they were playing.
Yeah.
And one day, one of the guys in the church, another young guy said, did you know that your son, one of my sons, is like one of the best in the world at this video game? I said, what? I didn't even know he played that video game. And I've always thought, well, I was that disconnected. One, I wasn't attracted to video games. It's never been my thing. But I didn't even know that about my son. I've always kind of thought, man, I missed that moment. And so I know Marcus has been really intentional. Marcus and Don have been really intentional, but technology in the home, even the cell phone thing, which I know today, kids 4, 5, 6 years old, I see them on their cell phones. They got it figured out, So how did you guys process that? What drove you to that? What caused you to make that decision?
Well, I think, we just saw the downside to it. We've tried to play board games and and whatnot with our kids. And with the girls, they got their cell phones at 16. Marcus won't enjoy this being on here, but he still doesn't have a cell phone, but he's only 15, so there's hope. But we really, we only see it more as just a form of communication.
Yeah.
And, there was times where I totally agree, with Richard. It's easy to give your child your phone and they can be quiet and you can do whatever's important. But, at the same time, one of my regrets is that I didn't take my kids to work with me more. I've taken each of them on trips to work, and they've, those are memories that they still talk about. And so I wish I could have done better at that.
I do it every year too. That's a great one. It's so important. If you don't mind, Pastor, I'll just share one of those tips on the cell phone thing. We walked through it with our daughter, Lisa, and we got her one of the phone watches that does not have internet access. It just has the ability to call and text those that we put in. But really the challenge is one, selfies. I've heard a recent study talk about that can actually be a form of self-worship. When those get to the point where you're always looking at yourself and you're always projecting how you are in this situation to be the focus of it all, it can be self-worship.
Oh, wow.
And then unfiltered internet is just like sending your kids out in the world and
Yes,
not
that's right.
looking at what they're doing and letting them just go do their thing and expecting them to come back home later on sometime. So for us, it was really intentional because it is great to have that communication. We do have GPS. I mean, those things are helpful. Technology can be a good tool, but we don't have the internet on the device and we don't have the ability for them to take selfies. We felt like that was a really good place for us.
That's good.
That's great. Pastor Joe, how about you?
Yeah, I want Abby to be consistent and finish strong in her teenage years as she grows up, and not to be wayward as I was in my teens as a PK, but continue in the faith and continue to grow strong. I'm a huge advocate of, you live under my roof, you abide by my rules. That was my dad, and if I can say anything at this table to anybody that maybe even be watching this, you don't do your kids any favor by letting them have their own way and staying home from church and community. It's so vital. It's so important to get them. And too many times I talk to dads and moms that want to be friends with their kids because they don't want to lose them and they don't want to hurt them and feel like they're going to drive them away by forcing them to come to church. I'm really grateful that my wife and myself were forced, if I can use that word, to go to church.
I was the drug baby.
Yeah.
I was drugged to church Sunday morning, Sunday night, Wednesday, man.
But because of that, I may have had my wayward time, but I knew where my foundation was. I had an anchor. And for any dad that's watching, any parent that's watching, continue to instill that anchor in your kids, in their spiritual walk. The Bible says, when a kid is raised in a certain path, they will not far away from that path. If they are wayward, they will be the prodigal son and come back. And I butchered that verse, but that's okay.
You got it.
Gotcha.
I just am a firm believer in that. Being in the seat that I'm in as a youth pastor, and many parents that I've talked to have had conversations with me, and I just get them here, just get them in church and get them consistent. And I've seen testimonies after testimonies of kids who have been on the outskirts, who have come in and been consistent, and their whole lives have changed. And I want that for my daughter as well. I want her to stay consistent and to stay faithful, despite what she may see or hear. And so that's my goal for her. That's what I would hope that she would carry with her for the rest of her life.